Finn here for Stretford Paddock. We are live in the studio, here to bring you all the latest Manchester United stories. So make sure you're getting involved in the chat. Make sure you're hitting that like button and subscribing. It's a beautiful Friday morning outside, so I'm excited to get into the news stories. This is a little bit of a new one for me. You may have already seen me on other shows like Academy Review and a few watch-alongs here and there, but I am here in lieu of Jay. Hopefully I can replace him. Let's get right into the story. So first one we're going to be talking about this morning is Joao Gomes. There's been a bit of confusion about this story, a bit of kind of mixed signalling coming through a few different journalists. There's been reported interest from Manchester United in the Brazilian midfielder. Obviously had a good season for Wolves despite their poor season so far. Fabrizio Romano has been talking about him, saying that United are interested. United have held talks over a deal for Gomes, and the Brazilian is seen as a potential replacement for Casemiro. Although it has been said by other sources, like David Ornstein, for example, that maybe there's not so much in that. David Ornstein said that there is no truth in reports that they're pursuing Joao Gomes. Wolves counterparts deny knowledge of interest from United and insist that talks between the clubs have not happened. So it's interesting to see that bit of disparity between what's being said there. Some sources saying there are interest, that there's talks that have been held. Some sources saying there's really nothing in it yet. Obviously that can change, and he's a player who a lot of Premier League clubs are going to be interested in. But yeah, let me know what you think about Joao Gomes as a player in the chat. Would you like him as a signing? Where I personally stand on it is as a kind of stopgap option, someone to bolster the squad at a good price. I think he's someone that could bring some real quality to the squad. Although for me, I think we should be setting our targets very high. The likes of Wharton, Baleba, Anderson, it's not quite in that same bracket. Good to see everyone in the chat this morning. Yeah, so I think it's one to keep an eye on for sure. Not sure if it's kind of hard to tell. Obviously, we know that Fabrizio Romano is very reliable. Same for David Ornstein. So it's always a bit of a weird one when what they're saying doesn't line up. But yeah, there's also talk recently about players like Conor Gallagher and a few other midfielder options. So it's interesting to see who United do go for, and if we do go for a midfielder in the January, how much we're willing to invest in that. I think there's an argument to be had that if we were to get a good midfielder, it could help push us on for top four, which is obviously the aim for the season, with silverware kind of out of the question, to be honest. But yeah, I think also we had a lot of quotes coming out from Paul Scholes yesterday. We had more talk about Kobbie Mainoo, which has been a big topic of conversation recently. Scholes said that Kobbie Mainoo came on the other night against Everton. He needs games of football. It looks like he was a little bit off the pace of the night because he's not played. You can expect that. One of the most disappointing things for me is Kobbie Mainoo not being involved in this Manchester United team, Scholes admitted. And I think that's the sentiment that a lot of fans have at the moment. I think it's a real shame because look, we all know the talent that Kobbie Mainoo possesses. We've seen what he's done in a United shirt. It's not even one of those things where we say, oh, this player's got loads of potential and if he's given the chance, he could do it. We've seen him do it. He basically, he played a massive role in us winning the FA Cup under Erik ten Hag. Obviously got that fantastic run for England where he ended up starting the Euros final. This is a player who most Premier League teams would snap our hands off to sign. And I think Nicky Butt made a really good argument, which is that if he was playing for another Premier League club or any other kind of European club, United would be bidding on him. United would be interested and would be, pursuing him as a target alongside the likes of Adam Wharton and Baleba. So it's a really kind of frustrating circumstance in many ways. Obviously, Ruben Amorim at the moment feels that he doesn't offer what he's looking for in a midfielder, in his midfield two. Obviously, we know that there's a lot of athletic requirements. He wants his midfielders to be physical, to cover a lot of ground. And so at the moment, Kobbie Mainoo just isn't getting a look in. He did get a bit of a run out against Everton, came on a bit earlier than he usually would, but a player of his quality, especially given the lack of our other options, for me, he should be starting Premier League games. And I think, without going overboard, I think with a player like Kobbie Mainoo, if your system can't accommodate him, that might say something more about the system, to be honest. There's definitely a conversation to be had. So yeah, what are people saying in the chat? He didn't help himself with that appearance off the bench, says Mick Holohan. I think, it's fair to argue that. Obviously, he hasn't come off the bench and hit the ground running and done anything incredible. At the same time, I don't think anyone on the pitch did, and it's really difficult when you're not getting sustained runs of games to pull together some good form. So it's really difficult. Bradley Morgan said, "Jay, you're looking quite pale, mate. I hope you're feeling okay." Yeah, a bit queasy today. If I didn't have Mainoo, I'd never be looking at him as a target over Wharton and Anderson. Yeah, I think there's the arguments to be had that he's fallen behind some of these other options that we're looking at. I think some people would say, is that not just a result of the fact that he's not been playing and not being given the chance to perform at that level? I think there's two sides of the coin, to be honest, and you have to think back to the Euros where Adam Wharton was available to be called upon. Obviously, there's a whole kind of year of development or 2 years of development that have taken place since then. But I think for me it's unfair to suggest that these aren't players of the same calibre or the same bracket of talent, because for me they're all top midfielders, and Kobbie Mainoo absolutely sits alongside those. So yeah, what's his best position? That is also another difficult question, because this system doesn't seem to have a position or a role for him that clearly suits his skill set and suits what he's capable of. Obviously, he could play in the midfield too, but I think most people would argue he'd need like a really leggy defensive midfielder next to him to cover that ground and kind of sweep up for him. And also, a lot of people feel that if you put him in one of the 10 positions, you kind of starve the team of what he can offer deeper in the pitch, picking up the ball off the defenders and progressing play. So it is a really difficult one, and it is a complex situation. But for me, I agree with what Paul Scholes is saying. It's, you want to see, especially a United Academy graduate who's been at the club since he was 8, you want to see him getting minutes, you want to see him starting games, and you want to see him continue to be an important part of the club, because at the end of the day, some of you will be familiar with the work I do on Academy Review. The Academy is the absolute foundation of the club. It always has been. Every era of success that the club has been because of the Academy, or at least built on the Academy. And I think we can't move away from that. So players like Kobbie Mainoo should be involved, should be important. I think you have to take anything that happened with England with a pinch of salt. They played no one until the final, and he got hammered for his performance. Yeah, for me that's a little bit harsh, because I think he was okay in the final. Obviously, again, didn't set the world alight, but he was competing with the likes of Adam Wharton. He got into a midfield with the likes of Jude Bellingham and Declan Rice, and for me, in most of his performances leading up to that, especially against the Netherlands, didn't look out of place and was one of England's better players. So yeah, I understand the frustration and people saying, well, he's not quite showing anything off the bench, but I just think it's difficult. Did we have any other quotes from Scholes from that interview? He was also talking about Ruben Amorim. He said, "We saw how good he was 18 months ago." Oh, sorry, that was about Kobbie Mainoo. He said, "The manager's just for some reason preferring somebody else, and that's something he has to deal with. I think he's dealt with it quite well at this minute, but at some point he will get frustrated. As I'm frustrated watching Manchester United at times as well, and especially with Kobbie Mainoo, because he's homegrown talent. We don't have many of them anymore, and we want him in our team." Yeah, echoing a lot of the same sentiments there. A United Academy player should be getting minutes and should be involved, especially when they've shown that they're good enough. Scholes was also saying the characteristics and traits to find your position. So he said, "I go back to Brian Robson, Roy Keane, Nicky Butts. They're capable of doing everything," Scholes said. You have to be capable of doing that. The game's changed. There's a holding midfield player. There's maybe 2 attacking midfield players. And so Scholes is kind of making the argument there that maybe United lack some all-round midfielders. I think that's quite true. In today's game, you see more midfield specialists. Someone who's seen almost exclusively as a number 10 or a number 8 or a number 6 or a box-to-box player. I think those players who can do a bit of everything are a rarity in today's market. And I think a clear example of that is Elliot Anderson. I think what has so many clubs interested in him at the moment, and why United continue to be linked with him. I think Andy Mitten and possibly David Ornstein were saying that he's emerging as United's favoured number one target, even ahead of Carlos Baleba. I think part of the reason for that is because he is such an all-rounder. He's not necessarily a specialist, but he could do any of those three positions to a high standard. He's got the defensive side down, great in duels, but also fantastic on the ball, retaining possession, evading pressure, things like that. So I think that's why Elliot Anderson would be a really good option for Manchester United. Xbot3 says, this two-man midfield is the problem. Outnumbered in midfield in English football is suicide. I think that's true. I think what's really important in Amorim's system is that the centre-backs, the wide centre-backs, jump so you aren't outnumbered in the middle, but I think that's really difficult, and it doesn't always happen. I think our centre-backs have really struggled to get that right a lot of the time, and I think it's been better this season, but there are still clearly growing pains there involved. It's because... Reece Roberts says it's because footballers aren't as good footballers these days. Much better athletes, of course, but too focused on running and drills than actual ballers. I think there's an argument to be had there as well, that the quality in football is falling off, but we could debate that endlessly. Ibrahimov, Sokar the Devil 666 says, Ibrahimov is small midfielder, but he seems very strong and hard to knock off the ball. When do you think he might get minutes in the first team? Yeah, I think he's one of the ones that will be on the kind of cusp, working towards a first team debut. Like you say, he's quite physical despite not being the largest player, and I think Amorim has to start looking at the options that are in the academy. He said he's willing to, but we haven't necessarily seen that yet. So yeah. I think we'll move on to our next story, maybe. I think we were looking at Ederson of Atalanta. This is someone that we've been linked to a lot in the past. Another player who would probably be seen as quite an all-rounder midfielder, someone who can do a bit of everything, maybe a box-to-box, can play more advanced, can play as a number 10, or can play a little bit deeper. So yeah, more reports that he could leave Atalanta. We had... According to information obtained by Trivela, the player's staff is in contact with interesting clubs and is exploring several possibilities for the midfielder, already thinking about the next transfer window in January, mid-season and in Europe. Atalanta has already indicated that it's willing to release the player, but it desires to have him at least until the end of the 2025-26 season. So the club would want at least 50 million euros. I'm not sure if that's just for January or for summer. But I think that means a January move would be unlikely for him. So it depends what United would be interested in, and whether we are interested at all. Because this is one of those players, it feels like almost like a Milinkovic-Savic, who United seem to be linked with every single summer. There's been a bit of a trend of United being linked to Ederson, and it's never really clear if there's anything in it, if anything will ever come to fruition. Although there has been rumours that he did almost join United. So Manchester United has become a likely destination for the 26-year-old Brazilian, according to Trivela. The English club is monitoring the player and maintains frequent contact with his staff. Trivela has heard that there is an expectation that talks between the club and the player will resume soon. So that's interesting to hear. Obviously, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, not necessarily one of the most reliable sources that we're used to hearing news from. But it would be an interesting one. Let me know what you think of Ederson in the chat, if he's a player that you think United could benefit from, if he could bring something useful to the team that maybe we don't have in the likes of Casemiro and Bruno and Ugarte and obviously Kobbie Mainoo. For me, he's another one that I'm a bit unconvinced on, to be honest. I think when you start getting linked to the likes of Carlos Baleba and Adam Wharton and Elliot Anderson, I think the standard has to be there. And unless you're getting someone in January who's a little bit of a stopgap and a bit of a squad option, I think Joao Gomes falls into that kind of bracket. Then it's unconvincing, to be honest. Steve M says we shouldn't buy anyone from Italy. Fair enough. I think there's always a transition problem or risk when you're buying players from abroad. And I think more so recently we've seen United focusing on buying Premier League proven top level players who can do it in England, can do it at the top level. And I think it's proven to be effective with the likes of Mbeumo and Cunha. I still expect a little bit more from Cunha, but we've seen the jump that our attack has taken this season just from investing in Premier League proven players. So I think there's certainly virtue in that. I like Ederson, but he doesn't control games of football, says Akash K. There's definitely weaknesses to his game that people would point out and would suggest that he's not necessarily the ideal option. Lee Smith says, is Collier, Kone perhaps options? I think definitely there's a lot of young players and a lot of young midfielders at Manchester United who, for me, deserve at least to have the opportunity to have a run out and impress. I think during AFCON, when United's squad is going to be a bit light and obviously we've got injuries, I think it would be a good time to test a few of the younger players and give them a chance. And because you never know, sometimes a young player comes through, isn't necessarily the highest rated and really surprises you and walks into the first team. So I think it's important that we give young players a chance. First name, last name says, agree, we shouldn't be buying from the Italian league. Zidane and Keane would struggle as a wide open double pivot in today's game. And I think there is the argument that, no matter who you have in that pivot, when you've got a numerical disadvantage, you're not platforming your players to the best of their abilities and you're not getting the best out of your players. So definitely some systematic criticisms to be had there, and I think it's on Amorim to prove that it can work and to prove that it can be effective regardless of personnel, because at the end of the day we don't have a perfect squad, and obviously you can invest a lot in the transfer windows, but if your system isn't effective and if your system doesn't platform your players, then you're never going to reach the heights that Manchester United should be aiming for. An interesting story there. We've got a few others to talk about, a few younger players from more kind of left field markets. So we had a story yesterday saying Manchester United are reportedly weighing up a potential transfer move for Internacional's highly rated young striker, Ricardo Mathias. I believe he's 19 years old. We've got a tweet here from MUFC Academy. Good Twitter page covering Academy Football at United. Says, from the little I've seen, I'll say Ricardo Mathias profiles as a fast, powerful forward with sharp movement, strong aerial ability and a clean finishing instinct. A very direct forward, and the clip I'll attach in the comments will show you that. Still a bit raw in his link-up play and overall consistency, but the tools are there, high potential talent, a blend of Scamacca and the good side of Nunes, a different profile to Sesko. So it sounds like an interesting footballer. I can't say I've watched much of him play, but this is the kind of profile that United need to be after. Highly rated attacking players who can offer something different to what we have in the squad. And again, another interesting one. I think we've seen from Ineos, we're moving towards almost the kind of Clear Lake Chelsea model of investing in a lot of young players who, worst case scenario, you're going to be able to get a return on your investment, and some of them may be able to step up to the level required of the first team, and it might end up saving you a lot of money in the process. So good to see United looking into different markets, seeing what players are available. I think we also had a little something on Cristian Orozco. Obviously, we've already heard that United have completed a deal to sign him, or at least there's a verbal agreement there. Now Fabrizio Romano has come out and confirmed that Orozco will be in the UK in the next days to complete his move. United will be paying $1 million fee to Fortaleza for the 17-year-old midfielder. I think this is a really great deal. Again, not a player I've seen tons of, but seen a fair bit of footage. I've watched some of his performances for Colombia's under-17s at the Under-17 World Cup, and seems to be a really, really talented kind of holding midfielder. Has played a lot of the time for Colombia in a single pivot, often picking the ball up from the defence, spraying it wide, distributing. So seems to be a player with a lot of potential, and good to see United getting ahead of that one, being proactive and sealing the deal now. Believe he's going to join in the summer, and then it will be evaluated whether he's going to go out on loan or if he's seen as good enough to stay with the first team, or maybe spend part of the season with the under-21s like we've seen from the likes of Sekou Kone and Diego Leon so far. Let me know what you make of Cristian Orozco if you've seen him, and what you make of this new kind of strategy that United have of signing these younger players and looking in other markets. Akash K says, I'd be amazed if there was a budget of any kind to do a big deal in January. Yeah, it will be difficult. Obviously, we spent a lot in the summer. We know we're not in the strongest financial position, not being in the Champions League. But some sources have said that money is there. So we'll just have to see what United can do. Well, so we've got just loan deals more likely in January, says Stephanie Griffith. I think that's probably true. I think Conor Gallagher is one that could come as a loan deal with a potential option to buy if United were going to go on and pursue that. Steve M said Ahmad came good, but it took a loan in a tough championship for him to succeed. I think that's often the case. Sometimes these high potential players come and maybe look a little bit underwhelming or a bit off the level when they first arrive in the first team, and what it takes for them is to get first team opportunities elsewhere, maybe at a slightly lower level, but the championship is a really, really competitive level of football. See what they're about, kind of learn their trade there and get used to the kind of physical rigours of that level of football, and then come back into the first team looking much better, as we saw from Ahmad, who's now, one of Manchester United's best players. Development's not linear, and sometimes it takes a few up and downs to reach that level. So yeah. What else have we got? We can buy whatever players we want. The backroom staff don't have the answers, says Common Pence. And yeah, I think that's a conversation that we've got to have. Obviously, the board currently are showing faith in Amorim, but at the end of the day, we need to see that there are solutions that suit the players and suit what they're capable of and play to their strengths. So we'll see what happens coming into the later parts of the season. Got just a couple of other players to talk about here. So Sully Talks, another good source when it comes to young players, especially in United's academy, says, understand Manchester United are monitoring the situation of 17-year-old Robinho Júnior. Santos sources don't rule out a sale by the end of the year to help with their financial situation. Multiple clubs are after him, and the Brazilian has been scouted by United and other clubs. Again, similar situation to a couple of these other names. Highly rated young player. Again, not someone I've watched much of, to be honest. Don't watch much Brazilian football, to be honest. But yeah, again, can't say much about that, but another good sign that United are continuing to search these markets. So yeah. Steve M says, people are impatient, we're a work in progress and still mentally fragile. There's going to be more games like Everton, but the general trend is upwards. And again, I think that's quite a balanced view, a balanced way of looking at it. If you look at some of the underlying numbers, they are improving. There are metrics that suggest that we have improved across the last kind of 8-9 months. But there are still major problems there. So yeah, I think there's got to be a balance in terms of having patience, understanding that we're in a rebuild, but also evaluating, are we taking the rebuild in the right direction, and is there the right ceiling to it that it needs to have? So yeah, lots of conversations that could be had. Tony Oshua says, yep, we owe Tony Mowbray a big thank you after looking after Ahmad for us. Yeah, absolutely. Ahmad was fantastic on that loan at Sunderland under Tony Mowbray, who kind of took him under his wing, gave him the opportunities, and really helped him flourish as a player. So definitely very true. And I think we had one last player to talk about. Jeremy Jacquet, or Jacquet, not too sure about the pronunciation. Manchester United are showing an interest in talented young Rennes defender Jeremy Jacquet, we'll call him for now, as first reported here on the Daily Mail. Manchester United, the Daily Briefing. Sorry, what source is this? Caught offside, yeah. Manchester United manager Ruben Amorim could do with more depth at the back, especially with Harry Maguire coming towards the end of his contract. I think that's a fair argument to make. Obviously, Harry Maguire's situation is still up in the air. We're not sure yet if he's going to extend or if he's going to leave in the summer. So Jacques has impressed United scouts, according to sources, though he's also been on the radar of Arsenal for some time. I remember hearing, I think it was David Ornstein may have reported Arsenal's interest in Jeremy Jacquet. Obviously, this is a very highly rated French young centre-back. Kind of shades of the situation Lenny Yoro was in when he was being pursued by the likes of Real Madrid and PSG and Liverpool, and obviously United were able to get that deal done. I think Jeremy Jacquet is being viewed as being in a kind of similar bracket of talent, a really, really highly rated player, certainly one of the highest rated centre-backs in his age group. And to be fair, it's a deal that I've said I'd really like United to go for. I think this is a player who can play either as a central centre-back or on the right. And I think, United could benefit massively from a player of his calibre, again, alongside someone like Lenny Yoro. And obviously De Ligt has been so much better this season than last season for me. I think he's been one of United's best players. So, United look like they're going towards building quite a formidable group of centre-backs with a lot of potential and a lot of youth and years ahead of them to improve as a group. So really encouraging to see United looking at these young players and searching markets that are going to benefit us, not just in the short term, but in the long term, to make sure that we're actually recruiting in a sustainable manner, because I think the unsustainability of our recruitment has been one of our biggest downfalls in the last 8, 9, 10 years. So, yeah, definitely. Steve M says, I think Maguire will stay. He's settled in Manchester and turned down the option to leave previously. He's going to be 33 if he signs a new deal and will likely accept a pay cut based on his age. I think that's the important thing. If he's willing to accept a pay cut and a significant one, then I think by all means keep him around. He's clearly a leader, a role model in the dressing room. Young players look up to him, and he's lots of reports come out saying that he always puts an arm around the shoulder of younger players. So I wouldn't be against United keeping Harry Maguire around. But yeah, I think that pretty much does us for the news stories this morning. Obviously, make sure that you are subscribing, tap that like button, and make sure you're sharing these videos with your friends. It's been a pleasure to do the news this morning. A bit of a new one for me, so sorry if there's been a bit of rust. But yeah, always a pleasure to come on. Thank you very much for getting involved in the chat, sharing your opinions. It's always good to hear from people, see what people think. At the end of the day, that's what matters, to hear from the fans. So yeah, thanks everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you later.